If you live in Punxsutawney, Pennsylvania, or Pensacola, Florida, or Pawtucket, Rhode Island, this is a good book for you to be reading, especially today. It is called The Groundhog and His Shadow. It was written and illustrated by Kurt Wiese. Kurt Wiese was born in Germany and became an artist, came here to the United States, and published more than 20 books for young learners. Some of them you'll recognize right away. Fish in the Air, Ping, You Can Write Chinese. Interesting books that you can find. At the bottom of this page, you can see groundhog.org. That's the official site for Phil the Groundhog in Punxsutawney, Pennsylvania. Deep under the snow, and deeper still under the frozen ground, lay the groundhog family, snoring peacefully, as they had since the beginning of winter. This morning, however, Mother Groundhog began to stir. Slowly, she rose on her arms and looked at the calendar on the wall, which was not there. Then she shook her husband and shouted into his ear, "Hey, get up! It is the 2nd of February, and time for you to go out and show yourself." Father Groundhog moaned and grumbled. Then he yawned, stroked his mustache, and went out the door. What he saw made him shudder. A whole line of people stood in a half circle around the door. Black square boxes, each with one big eye, stared in his face and almost scared him back to bed. But a date is a date, and he had to go out and look for his shadow. Sure enough, the sun was shining brightly, and the groundhog saw his blue shadow stretching long over the sparkling snow. When he saw it, he turned on his heel and went back into his cave. The cameras clicked, the pencils scratched, and the men ran to their cars and were off to tell the world that the groundhog had seen his shadow and that there would be 6 more weeks of winter. The groundhog went straight back to bed, muttering grimly into his frozen mustache, "I wish I could get rid of that shadow." Spring came at last, and the groundhog opened his door and ventured out. A fox came by. He stopped when he saw the groundhog nibbling at the fresh grass and said, "What a beautiful shadow you have, Mr. Groundhog." No wonder people come from far and near to look at it. The groundhog looked up. "You can have it. It is for sale." "How much do you want for it?" Just a bundle of hay." "Oh," said the fox, "that is easy. Come along, and I will get you the hay." So they went to the barn, and the fox was quick in getting to the upper floor where the hay was stored. He threw a bundle right at the groundhog's feet. He took the hay, as all groundhogs do, holding it in his paws and pressing his chin down. At the hole, he stopped and said to the fox, "Now, take it if you can." The fox said, "Hold still." Then he jumped over the shadow 3 times and sneezed on it. After this performance, he took the shadow by its ears and rolled it up like a towel. When he came to the tail end, the fox shouted, "Jump!" And that is what the groundhog did. He jumped so hard that he fell right down his hole. The fox went off with the rolled-up shadow under his arm and returned to his cave, where he did some hard thinking. "I have it," he said to himself. "I can sell it to the weatherman, if he can see my point." Mr. Storm, the weatherman, lived in a tower outside the city. His room had windows on all sides so that he could watch the clouds sail by. In the middle of the room stood all the delicate instruments that wrote down lots of lines and curves from which Mr. Storm could read what weather there would be. The fox climbed up the steep staircase, carrying the shadow under his arm, and soon was knocking at the weatherman's door. "Come in," croaked the foggy voice of Mr. Storm. He was speechless, however, when a fox came in and said, "I have here under my arm the shadow of the groundhog. It is a nice one, with neither tear nor crack. The edges are solid, and the ears are tall and intact." With these words, he spread the shadow out on the floor, pulled it smooth, and went on. "This shadow is for sale, and I came to you first because I am sure you will want it." The weatherman regained his speech. "But what shall I do with it?" "Ah," said the fox, "it will be priceless to you. Listen, if you own this shadow, the groundhog will never be able to take a look at it when he comes out in February, so that there will be no more winter after that, and this will enable you, sir, to predict forever an early spring." The weatherman became very angry then. "Such nonsense! Nobody really believes the old fairy tale, least of all a scientist like me, who has all his instruments working for him with great accuracy. Now get out of here before I call the dog catcher." When the fox heard this horrible word, he ran to the door and down the staircase. The weatherman picked up the shadow and threw it after the fox, who never looked back, but ran as fast as he could home to his cave. By this time, the shadow of the groundhog had regained consciousness. The spell of the fox was gone, and the shadow sat up and looked around. Not knowing where he was, he climbed down the staircase and reached the open door through which the sun was shining. Here the shadow got his strength back. He had lost it in the dark hallway. At last he could walk, and on he went, trying to find his partner, who so greedily had sold him for a handful of hay. Meanwhile, the groundhog was very unhappy. There was no trace of a shadow around him. He felt as if he were standing on a stage with floodlights exposing him to all the world. Since early morning, the youngsters of woods and meadow had been after him, asking, "Where's your shadow, Mr. Groundhog?" And nobody was afraid of him because there was no dark outline to make him look more dangerous than he was. "Oh, my," the groundhog moaned. "I wish I had my shadow back." He had hardly finished these words when he saw a blue thing standing up in the grass, coming toward him with outstretched arms. It frightened him, and he ran away as fast as he could to get into his hole, but the thing followed him and came nearer and nearer. Under and over the fence went the chase, till at last the thing got hold of the groundhog's hind feet and held on. The groundhog stopped, but his fright turned into happiness. It was his shadow. There it lay at his feet and never moved, and the groundhog, with a loud whistle, told the world, "Never but never will I part from my partner again." And on February 2nd, at least, that is the end. Unless you want to go back and listen a second time. This book has been The Groundhog and His Shadow. It was written by and illustrated by Kurt Wiese.